Hello, I'm Andrew Airholtz, the broker and owner of Vision Properties Management Company. We require you to watch this video before you sign a lease. We recorded this video so you can watch it at your own leisure. It is helpful for you to have a copy of your lease handy to read along. If you need to stop the video, note the time. You can also pause it. We have the list of sections below in the description with the time that each section starts. That way you can easily pick up where you left off. Let's get started. The rental contract. In consideration of the agreements of the residents known as blank, all adults need to sign on this blank, including cosigners. The owner hereby rents them the dwelling located at, here we put the full address of the home, for the period commencing, which means beginning, at 3 p.m. on the blank day of, fill in the month and the year, and monthly thereafter until 11 a.m. on the blank date of the month and the year. Typically, the first of the first month to the last day of the last month. For example, May 1st, 2017 would be when a lease would typically start, and if it ended on April 30th, 2018, that is a one-year contract. Unless a new contract is signed, this contract automatically becomes a month-to-month contract after that time, and minimum of 2 full rental period notice is required in writing before terminated. Residents, in consideration of owners permitting them to occupy the above property, hereby agree to the following terms. Rent. To pay without demand the sum of blank. This is not including the pet or appliance fees per month, due and payable in advance from the first day of every month. Failure to pay rent when due will result in the owner taking immediate legal action to evict the resident from the premises and seizing the security deposit. All residents are joint and severally liable for all obligations under this contract. If one person does not pay rent or is breaking the rules, everyone else is responsible. Biweekly pay. If agreeable to the owner and resident, rent may be paid every 2 weeks instead of monthly. An addendum will be required. Late fee. Rent is due on the 1st of every month. Rent received after the 5th of the month will be subject to a late fee of 8% of rent due. Partial payment is subject to 8% of total remaining monthly rent up to maximum fees available by law. Bad checks. Residents further agree to pay as a service charge the larger of $20 or 5% of the amount of any dishonored check, regardless of cause. Extra persons. To use said dwelling as living quarters for blank adults and blank children named blank. Here we put the full first and last names of all the occupants. Any other person shall not occupy the premises in any capacity other than visiting. Persons other than those specifically listed on the rental contract shall be strictly prohibited from staying in the rental unit for more than 7 consecutive days, or a total of 14 nights in any 12-month period. Visitors must have another address where they receive mail. For purposes of this section, staying in the rental unit shall include, but not be limited to, long-term or regular house guests, live-in babysitters, and visiting relatives. Resident may be required to notify the management any time the resident expects any guest will be staying in the unit overnight. Additional residents cannot occupy the premises without first being approved by management and are subject to full screening procedures. If additional residents are accepted, this is also subject to additional rent and security deposit being required. Unauthorized residents are a violation of the lease contract and are grounds for termination. Pets. Pets are not allowed unless agreement is made in writing between the owner and resident. Charges may apply. Acceptance of property. Resident accepts the as-is condition of the property, waiving inspection of the same by the owner, and agrees to notify the owner of any defects. Resident further agrees to indemnify the owner against any loss or liability arising out of resident's use of the property, including those using the property with the resident's consent. Here we have a place to initial this page. There will be a place to initial every page at the bottom. Number 8, maintenance. Resident agrees to maintain the premises during the period of this contract. This includes woodwork, floors, walls, furnishings and fixtures, appliances, windows, screens, and doors. Resident also agrees to communicate any problems with plumbing, electrical, air conditioning and heating, and mechanical systems of which the owner is responsible for repair. Tacks, nails, or other hangers pushed, nailed, or screwed into the walls or ceilings will be removed and damage repaired by the resident at the termination of this contract. This does not apply to wooden tongue-and-groove walls. If you leave windows open, for example, when raining, or don't let us know when water is leaking, you will be responsible for water damage. What it says here is, damage caused by rain, hail, or wind as a result of leaving windows or doors open, or damage caused by overflow of water or stoppage of waste pipes, breakage of glass, damage to screens, deterioration of lawns and landscaping, whether caused by abuse or neglect, is the responsibility of the resident. Resident agrees to provide pest control in the event it is needed. Number 9, vehicles. Resident agrees never to park or store a motorhome, recreational vehicle, or trailer of any type on the premises, and to park only automobiles only on the driveways provided. Resident agrees that no vehicle may be repaired, nor may any vehicle be stored on the property without a current registration and tag, except on the driveway or in a garage. Resident agrees that any vehicle parked on any other areas or vehicle without a current registration may be towed and stored at the resident's expense by a towing company. Security deposit number 11. Resident agrees to pay a deposit in the amount of blank to secure the resident's pledge of full compliance with the terms of this contract. That deposit number has already been determined, and if you have any questions about that, please talk to one of us. Note, the deposit may not be used by the resident to pay rent during the tenancy. The security deposit will be used at the end of the tenancy to compensate the owner for any cleaning damages or unpaid rent or charges. Repairs will be done at the resident's expense with funds other than the deposit. Number 12, resident's obligations. The resident agrees to meet all of the resident's obligations, including A, taking affirmative action to ensure that nothing exists which might place the owner in violation of applicable building, housing, and health codes. For example, make sure that there are no broken windows or missing handrail. Let us know so we can get it fixed. B, keep the dwelling clean and sanitary. Remove garbage and trash as they accumulate, maintaining plumbing in good working order to prevent stoppages and or leakage of plumbing, fixtures, faucets, pipes, etc. C, operate all electrical, plumbing, sanitary, heating, ventilating, air conditioning, and other appliances in a reasonable and safe manner. D, assuring that property belonging to the owner is safeguarded against damage, destruction, loss, removal, or theft. The best thing I tell people there is just lock your doors and latch your windows when you're gone for a while. E, conducting him, herself, his, her family, friends, guests, and visitors in a manner which will not disturb others. No parties are allowed on the premises. Resident warrants that he or she will meet the above conditions in every respect and acknowledges that failure to do so will be grounds for termination of this contract and loss of all deposits without further recourse. Number 13, subletting. Resident agrees not to assign this contract nor to sublet any part of this property, nor to allow any other person to live therein other than as named in Statement 5 above, without first requesting permission from the owner and paying the appropriate surcharge. Further, that covenants contained in the rental contract, once breached, cannot afterward be performed, and that eviction proceedings may be commenced at once without notice. If any person not named in this contract resides in the unit overnight for 7 consecutive days or more without written permission of the landlord, shall be deemed to be a material violation of the term of this lease, contract, and subject the contract to cancellation by the landlord, at the landlord's discretion, of the balance of the term, and the landlord shall have all of the right contained herein to evict the tenant and non-approved guests. So if you want someone else to move in, let us know right away. Fill out the appropriate paperwork. We must approve that person or any changes, and you might pay a fee as we change the terms of this contract. We'll explain that in a bit on another section. Number 14, court costs. Don't forget to initial, by the way. Resident agrees to pay court costs and attorney's fees incurred by the owner in enforcing legal action or any of the owner's other rights under this contract or any state law. In the event any portion of this contract shall be found to be unsupportable under the law, the remaining provisions shall continue to be valid and subject to enforcement in the courts without exception. The resident shall collect no more than $1,000 in court costs and attorney's fees incurred by the resident in enforcing legal action or any of the resident's other rights under the contract or any state law. Number 15, owner statements. All rights given to the owner by this contract shall be cumulative, in addition to any other laws which might exist or come into being. Any exercise or failure to exercise by the owner or any right shall not act as a waiver of any other rights. No statement or promise of owner or his agent as to tenancy, repairs, alterations, or other terms and conditions shall be binding unless specified in writing and specifically endorsed. Number 16, partial payment. The acceptance by the owner of partial payments of rent due shall not under any circumstance constitute a waiver of the owner, nor affect any notice or legal eviction proceedings in theretofore given or commenced under state law. Number 17, abandonment. If resident leaves said premises unoccupied for 5 days without written notice to the landlord while rent is due and unpaid, owner is granted the right hereunder to take immediate possession thereof and to exclude resident therefrom, removing at his or her expense all of his or her property contained therein and placing it into storage at the resident's expense. If the property has not been claimed after 23 additional days, it becomes the property of the owner. Unoccupied means that the unit shows no signs of activity, including but not limited to the absence of a motor vehicle and or the absence of the ordinary household goods. Number 18, right to sign. The individual signing this rental contract stipulates and warrants that he, she, or they have the right to sign for and bind all occupants. Number 19, utilities. This varies from place to place and should have been discussed before you sign a lease. If you have any questions, please get answers to those questions before you sign this lease. Some places have all utilities included, other ones tenants pay all the utilities, and some are partial utilities paid by the tenant. And there's checkboxes here. Residents shall be responsible for payments of any electric, gas, water, sewer, garbage. Those are options. Telephone, internet, or other bills are at the tenant's discretion, incurred during their residency. Resident agrees to transfer, if the boxes are checked above, we'll check these here below as well, the electric, gas, water, sewer, garbage service charges to their name immediately upon beginning of the contract and to make arrangements for meter readings as needed. We typically tell people, if you're moving in, for example, on May 1st, you can call a month ahead of time if you'd like to, and just say that you'd like the utilities to start in your name as of May 1st. They specifically authorize the owner to deduct amounts of unpaid bills from their deposits in the event they remain unpaid after the termination of this contract. Upon move-out, the resident shall make sure any propane tanks are left with at least the same amount of propane as move-in, or the difference shall be paid for or come out of the security deposit at the current rate of propane per gallon. This only applies if you have propane heat, that section in bold. Number 20, personal property. No rights of storage are given by this contract. The owner shall not be liable for any loss of personal injury or property by fire, theft, breakage, burglary, or otherwise for any accidental damage to persons, guests, or property in or about the leased rented property resulting from electrical failure, water, rain, windstorm, or any act of God, or negligence of owner, or owner's agent, contractors, or employees, or by any other cause whatsoever. Resident covenants and agrees to make no claim for any such damages or loss against the owner, but to purchase needed renter's insurance, or to provide self-insurance in adequate amounts to offset any risk. The resident agrees to list the owner as additional insured on their insurance policies. If you don't have renter's insurance and we do agree to rent to you, we will initial this opt-out clause. The owner and resident must both initial here if the requirement that resident obtain renter's insurance is waived. The owner's insurance policy does not cover damages or loss of the resident's personal possessions, as well as losses resulting from the resident's negligence. Number 21. Alteration, removal of property. Alter means change. Resident agrees not to remove or alter in any way the owner's property without specific written permission from the owner. Any removal or alteration of the owner's property without permission shall constitute abandonment and surrender of the premises, and termination by the resident of this contract. Owner may take immediate possession and exclude residents from the property, storing all residents' possessions at residents' expense, pending reimbursement in full for the owner's loss and damages. Initial at the bottom of the page. Number 22. Termination. After 1 month's rental payment has been received, all parties agree that termination of this contract prior to, and this is the end date from item 1 on page 1 that you fill in here, the end date of the contract, regardless of cause, will constitute a breach of the tenancy as agreed on page 1, and all deposits shall be forfeited in favor of the owner as full liquidated damages at the owner's option, or an early lease termination fee may be assessed. Resident must give owner their intentions in writing at least 2 full rental periods before the end or ending the contract. Even if your contract expires, for example, on April 30th, we'll still want to know that you're planning to move out by the end of March. Number 23, modifications. And this could apply if, for example, you have a tenant move in or a tenant move out. That's a modification. Following the initial completion of this contract by all tenants and the owner, any requested and approved modifications to this contract by one or more of the residents may result in a modification fee being assessed in an amount up to that of an early lease termination fee. The type of modification request and the reason for the request may impact the amount of this fee. All modification fees must be paid in full a minimum of 1 week prior to the date for which the modification is to take effect. Number 24, method of payment. Deposit and initial rent payments may be paid by check until the first check is dishonored and returned unpaid. Regardless of the cause, the landlord reserves the right to not accept any payments by check. The landlord reserves the right not to redeposit the check at the landlord's discretion. The resident will be notified by a 3-day notice and will be required to pay the amount due, including the bad check charge, in cash, money order, or certified check. Resident is aware that the owner may report past rent, damages, utilities, or other costs owed by the resident to credit reporting agencies. The resident understands this reporting could affect the resident's ability to obtain credit for future housing. Number 25, delivery of rents. Different owners have different ways of accepting rents, so we will have to determine before you fill out this next section what property you are renting and what the owner will allow. One day, I'm hoping that all owners will take all payments online. So delivery of rents may or may not be paid online at visionbemidji.com. Rents may or may not be mailed through the U.S. mail to blank. Note, if you do mail rent, any rents lost in the mail will be treated as if unpaid until received by the owner. Rents may or may not be delivered in person to the owner's office at blank. Rents may or may not be delivered in person to the owner's bank account at blank. Number 26, return of deposit. Security deposits will be deposited for the resident's benefit in a non-interest-bearing bank account. Release of the deposits is subject to the provisions of state statutes and as follows. A. The full term of this contract has been completed. B. Formal written notice has been given as per statement 22 above. C. No damage or deterioration to the premises, buildings, or grounds is evident. D. The entire dwelling, appliances, closets, drawers, and cupboards are clean. The freezer does not have frost buildup, and all debris and rubbish has been removed from the property. The carpets are cleaned and left odorless. We have a cleaning checklist for you to fill out. E. Any and all unpaid charges, late charges, delinquent rents, utility charges, etc. have been paid in full. F. All keys have been returned, including keys to any new locks installed while the resident was in possession. G. A forwarding address has been left with the owner. 21 days after termination of occupancy, the owner will send the balance of the deposit to the address provided by the resident, payable to the signatories hereto, or the owner will impose a claim on the deposit and so notify the resident by mail. 27. Phone. Resident agrees to maintain telephone service and agrees to furnish to the owner the phone number and any changes within 3 days after changes are made. Of course, this includes cell phones. I do notify a lot of tenants by text messaging as well as cell phone calls. Please initial at the bottom of this page. Number 28, 3-day inspection. Under the terms of this rental contract, residents will be provided with an inspection sheet. It is their obligation to inspect the premises and to fill out and return to the owner their inspection sheet within 3 days after taking possession of the premises. It will be presumed that the house is functioning in a satisfactory manner in all respects after the expiration of the 30 days. 3 days. Resident agrees that failure to file such a statement shall be conclusive proof that there were no defects of note in the property. After that time, the resident is obligated to provide for routine maintenance at their expense. Number 29. Owners, agents, and access. The owner may be represented by an agent who will carry identification. The resident specifically agrees to permit the owner or agents access to all rooms in the premises for the purposes of inspection, repairs, or to show the property to another person at reasonable hours. The resident will also allow signage in the yard or on the house. The property may be shown months before this contract is up. Number 30. Improvements and repairs. If repairs and improvements are needed, the resident must contact the owner. If any improvement or repair is not approved by the owner, the resident will be responsible for the entire cost of that repair. Any improvement made by the resident shall become the property of the owner at the conclusion of this contract. Number 31. Workers' warranty. All parties to this contract warrant that any work or repairs performed by the resident will be undertaken only if he or she is competent and qualified to perform it, and the person performing the work will be totally responsible for all activities to assure they are done in a safe manner which will meet all applicable statutes. They further warrant that they will be accountable for any mishaps or accidents resulting from such work, and that they will hold the owner free from harm, litigation, or claims of any other person. Number 32. Lead-based paint. Houses built before 1978 may contain lead-based paint. Lead from paint, paint chips, and dust can pose health hazards if not taken care of properly. Lead exposure is especially harmful to young children and pregnant women. Before renting pre-1978 housing, owners must disclose the presence of known lead-based paint and lead-based paint hazards in the dwelling. Residents must also receive a federally approved pamphlet of lead poisoning prevention. Number 33. Radon. Radon is a naturally occurring radioactive gas that, when it has accumulated in a building in sufficient quantities, may present health risks to persons who are exposed to it over time. Levels of radon gas that exceed federal and state guidelines have been found in buildings. Additional information regarding radon and radon testing may be obtained from your county public health office. Number 34. Business. No business of any kind is to be operated on the premises without written permission of the owner. This includes, but is not limited to, daycare, babysitting, and yard sale or garage sale. Number 35. Default by resident. Any breach or violation of any provision of this contract by resident, or any untrue or misleading information in the resident's application, shall give the owner or his agents the right to terminate this contract, evict the resident, and to take possession of the residence. The resident agrees to a forfeiture of the security deposit, and owner may still pursue any remaining amounts due and owing. Number 36. Bankruptcy. In the event of bankruptcy or state insolvency proceeding being filed against the resident, his heirs, or assign, at the option of the owner, his agent, heirs, or assigns, and immediately declare this contract null and void, and at once resume possession of the premises. No judicial officer shall ever have any rights, title, or interest in or to the above described property by virtue of this contract. Number 37. Renewal Term. At the end of the initial term herein, as per page 1, the owner may elect to renew for another term, but the amount of rent and deposit are subject to change. Please initial at the bottom of the page. Number 38. Acknowledgement. In this contract, the singular number where used will also include the plural. The term owner will include landlord, lessor, and agents acting on the owner's behalf, and the term resident will include tenant, and lessee. The below signed parties acknowledge that they have read and understand all of the provisions of this contract. This contract is bound by all heirs, executors, and successors and/or assigns. Number 39, legal contract. This is a legally binding contract. If you do not understand any part of this contract, seek competent legal advice before signing. Additional rules and regulations, if any, shall be signed by the resident, attached to this contract, and incorporated into it. The owner may adopt other rules and regulations at a later time, provided that he or she have a legitimate purpose, not modify the resident's rights substantially, and not become effective without notice of at least 2 weeks. Number 40, other addenda. This contract also includes and is subject to additional terms of blank. This is typically, for example, public assistance, active duty, military, etc. Things that would change the body of the contract that we've already read. There are additional addenda that you may sign that we will add to the lease. For landlord and tenant rights, please see this website that I have underlined here. And it is accepted. Put down today's date, the day of the month, and the year at the time of day that you sign this. And we want all adults signing this part that will be living in the property, and any co-signers can sign here as well. And then we'll sign below that. The blank below owner agent says addenda. This is where we would put, for example, pet addendum. Just put pet, comma, appliance, comma, garage, if you have those things in your property. The next blank is for rent, which is the same as page 1, just the rent for the home. The addenda, if you're going to be paying, for example, $50 a month for a pet and $25 for an appliance, you would put $75 in this blank if you're paying for both of those, for example. Your total monthly payment would be your rent in this example plus $75, plus your deposit for the home only would go in the next blank. If, for example, you're paying $600 for rent, $600 would go in the first blank there. Your $75 for addenda, total monthly payment would be $675. In that example, your deposit might be $700 for the home, which is what you put there. An animal fee is non-refundable. You would put that there. It might be $200, for example, that you pay before your lease starts. And then on the last part where it says paid, put the date there, or the dates that you have paid those deposits. Please put your vehicle information here at the bottom. We've got places for 4 vehicles here. If you have additional vehicles, put those below that. If you haven't already and you want to take some notes to ask us some questions, pause the video, grab a piece of paper, and start writing down some questions you might have. We'd be happy to answer those if we can. Building rules is the next page, page 7. Eviction can result from non-compliance to these building rules. Number 1, residents must replace their own light bulbs and alarm batteries. Smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors must be checked and maintained by the residents. If they need to be replaced, let us know. Number 2, residents are responsible for removing refuse and garbage, and you may or may not be responsible for grass cutting and snow removal. Talk to us about that before you sign this. Do not put appliances, furniture, computers, vacuums, mattresses, box springs, etc. in or by the dumpster or garbage cans. They will not be picked up. If you need to dispose of these things, either you find someone to do that for you, haul it away yourself, or hire us to have that stuff moved for you. Number 3, residents are required to show consideration for the building, neighbors, and fellow residents, including being prudent with regards to loud televisions, music, fighting, shouting, profanity, etc. Residents agree to enforce a 10 p.m. quiet curfew. Number 4, do not flush anything in the toilet other than human waste and toilet paper. Number 5, no smoking is permitted in the building, including entryways. Residents will sign a no smoking addendum. Put cigarette butts in a safe, non-burnable container. Plastic is not non-burnable. Number 6, no alterations, additions, or improvements shall be made in or to the premises without the prior written consent of the owner. Damage is responsibility of the resident. Equipment failure, other than abuse or neglect, is responsibility of the owner. Number 7, reading of the propane tank meter is blank % upon move-in. When the tenant moves out, propane meter must read at least what this percentage is, or pay the owner the difference based upon current rates per gallon. Again, this only applies if you have propane heat. Number 8, be familiar with breaker box, plunging of toilets, and emergency procedures. Complete any necessary resident training. Breaker box is blank, that's where the location is, and the fire extinguisher is blank. We'll put the location of that too. Call if you need help filling that out. The necessary resident training is if you're having continual problems of things you should be able to take care of as the responsibilities of a tenant, we may need to teach you how to do certain things, like plunge a toilet, for example. Number 9, resident must replace furnace and air conditioner filters every blank. Maybe you need to do that every 30 days, maybe every 90 days, maybe only during the heating season. Talk to us about that if you have questions. Maybe you don't have filters in your place and you don't need to replace filters. Number 10, resident agrees not to install a washing machine, dryer, waterbed, or air conditioner without prior written approval of the owner. Number 11, resident will not be allowed to move goods or property from leased premises other than those belonging to the resident. Number 12, resident agrees to have no animals or pets of any kind on the premises without owner's written consent. Number 13, residents may not install or change locks. If resident becomes locked out of the premises, resident will be required to secure a locksmith to regain entry at the resident's sole expense. Interior locks with keys are not allowed unless the owner or agents are provided with working keys. Owners and agents are permitted access to all rooms for the purposes of inspection, repairs, or to show the property to another person at reasonable hours. Number 14, if you have any questions, problems, or complaints, please do not hesitate to call the owner or agent. Sign the top line, date it, we'll sign the bottom line and date it. Page 8, no smoking contract addendum. Reference is hereby made to a contract or tenancy at will contract, lease, by and between the resident, including all members of resident's family or household, resident, and the landlord. The following additional provisions shall be fully applicable to the contract and made part thereof as though included within the contract itself. Purpose: resident acknowledges the following. Smoking increases the risk of fire. Smoking will damage the residence unit. Secondhand smoke will drift from one residence to another and will cause discomfort to other residents and their guests. Increased maintenance, cleaning, and redecorating costs from smoking, and the potential higher costs of fire insurance for a non-smoke-free building. Exposure to secondhand smoke causes adverse health outcomes. Definitions. Smoking shall include the inhaling, exhaling, breathing, carrying, or possession of any lighted cigarette, cigar, pipe, or other product containing any amount of tobacco or other similarly lighted product, including e-cigarettes and hookah. The term landlord shall include property owners and property managers. No smoking rule. No resident shall smoke nor permit anyone to smoke in the residence unit. Smoking shall be prohibited throughout the entire building, including but not limited to hallways, stairways, foyers, common roofs and facilities, decks, patios, exterior landings, front steps, entranceways, rooftops, fire escapes, basements, storage areas, parking areas, driveways, walkways, lawns, gardens, adjoining grounds, and building facilities. So basically, nowhere on the property. Designated smoking area. The foregoing rule notwithstanding, the landlord may designate an area for smoking, provided the designated area is located outside of and away from any building or other location where secondhand smoke might drift back into the building. Resident acknowledges that the designated smoking area may be relocated from time to time or eliminated entirely at any time during the contract term. Compliance. Landlord shall take reasonable steps to ensure compliance with the terms and provisions of this addendum. Resident shall inform the resident's guests of the no smoking rule. Resident shall promptly give the landlord notice of any incident of smoking that violates any of the conditions of this addendum, and resident shall mitigate secondhand smoke. Third-party beneficiaries. Residents agree that other residents in the building are the third-party beneficiaries of this no smoking addendum, and accordingly, a resident has the right to bring action or sue another resident for an injunction to prohibit smoking or for damages. Any exercise of these rights by the landlord or another resident shall not create a presumption that the landlord breached this addendum. Resident to promote no smoking policy and to alert landlord of violations. Residents shall inform residents' guests of the no smoking policy. Further, residents shall promptly give the landlord a written statement of any incident where tobacco smoke is migrating into the residence unit from sources outside of the residence. This includes incidents whereby the secondhand smoke was created by someone other than the resident or their guests. Disclaimer. Resident acknowledges the following. A. That the adoption and or enforcement of the no smoking rule shall not make the landlord a guarantor of the resident's health or of the smoke-free condition of the resident's apartment and the common areas. B. The adoption and or enforcement of the no smoking rule shall not in any way change the warranty of habitability, the covenant of quiet enjoyment, or other duty of care owed to the resident. And C. That landlord's ability to police, monitor, or enforce the no smoking rule is dependent in significant part on compliance by the resident and resident's guests. Landlord specifically disclaims any implied or express warranties that the building, common areas, or residence premises will have any higher or improved air quality standards than any other rental property. The landlord cannot and does not warranty or promise that the rental premises or common areas will be free from secondhand smoke. However, the landlord shall take reasonable steps to enforce the smoke-free terms of its contracts and to make the building smoke-free. This contract addendum does not grant to the resident any greater right to terminate the contract due to violations of this contract addendum than the resident would have without this contract addendum being part of the lease contract. The landlord is not required to take steps in response to smoking unless the landlord knows of said smoking or has been given written notice of said smoking. The resident acknowledges that landlord's adoption of a smoke-free living environment and the efforts to designate the building as smoke-free do not in any way change the standard of care that the landlord or managing agent would have to a resident household to render buildings and premises designated as smoke-free any safer, more habitable, or improved in terms of air quality standards than any other rental premises. Residents with respiratory ailments, allergies, or any other physical or mental condition relating to smoke are put on notice that landlord does not assume any higher duty of care to enforce this addendum than any other landlord obligation under the contract. Effect of breach and right to terminate contract. A breach of this contract addendum shall give the landlord any resident abating secondhand smoke all the rights contained herein, as well as the rights in the contract. A breach of this addendum shall be a material breach of the contract and grounds for immediate termination of the contract by the landlord. Sign on the top as a resident, and we will sign on the bottom. Contract addendum for crime-free, drug-free housing on page 10. In consideration of the execution or renewal of a contract of the dwelling unit identified in the contract, owner and resident agree as follows. Number 1. Resident, any members of the resident's household or a guest or other person under the resident's control shall not engage in illegal activity, including drug-related illegal activity on or near the said premises. Drug-related illegal activity means the illegal manufacture, sale, distribution, purchase, use, or possession with intent to manufacture, sell, distribute, or use of a controlled substance as defined in Section 102 or the Controlled Substance Act 21 U.S.C. 802, or possession of drug paraphernalia. Number 2. Resident, any member of resident's household or a guest or other person under the resident's control shall not engage in any act intended to facilitate illegal activity, including drug-related illegal activity, on or near the said premises. Number 3. The resident or members of the household will not permit the dwelling to be used for or to facilitate illegal activity, including drug-related illegal activity, regardless of whether the individual engaging in such activity is a member of the household. Number 4. Resident or members of the household will not engage in the manufacture, sale, or distribution of illegal drugs at any locations, whether on or near the dwelling unit premises or otherwise. Number 5. Resident, any member of the resident's household or a guest or other person under the resident's control shall not engage in acts of violence or threats of violence, including but not limited to the unlawful discharge of firearms, prostitution, criminal street gang activity, intimidation, or any other breach of the rental contract that otherwise jeopardizes the health, safety, or welfare of the landlord, his agents, or tenants. Number 6. Violation of the above provisions shall be a material violation of the contract and good cause for termination of the tenancy. A single violation of any of the provisions of this added addendum shall be deemed a serious violation and material non-compliance with the contract. It is understood and agreed that a single violation shall be good cause for termination of the contract. Unless otherwise provided by law, proof of violation shall not require criminal conviction, but shall be by the preponderance of the evidence. Number 7. In case of conflict between the provisions of this addendum and any other provisions of the contract, the provisions of this addendum shall govern. Number 8. This contract addendum is incorporated into the contract executed or renewed this day between the owner and resident. Resident sign the top line, we will sign the next line, and either one of us can sign the date signed below that. Residents acknowledge receipt of this addendum by signature of this document. And page 11 is your property inspection checklist. We mentioned that earlier. We tried to be detailed here from top to bottom with lots of different move in, move out things to be aware of. On the left-hand side of this column, the left-hand column is a move-in column, and you can write OK there. You can put checks there, just make it obvious if there are some problems with some of the things listed here. If you want to use the back side of this paper, a separate sheet of paper, take pictures, videos to show us the condition of the property when you moved in. When you move out, we will compare this property inspection checklist and anything you have to go with it to the condition of the property when you move out. And then the next column here are typical charges that we charge to repair some of these things. And then that final column will give us a place to add up charges. For example, on the far left-hand column it says light bulbs. If you put OK here or a check mark that the light bulbs were OK, and upon move out we find out that 2 of them are burned out, we'll put the number 2 there. We could charge anywhere from $3 to $10 per light bulb, and then we would multiply that by 2 in that example, and we might charge $5 a light bulb, be $10 a piece. If they're expensive light bulbs, we might charge $10 a piece for $20 in that right-hand column. If that was the only issue that we found with the property, we would carry that $10 amount down to the bottom, and we'll get to that in just a second. Move out is 11 a.m. on the move out date. The deposit you paid, the example we used earlier was $700. If that was the case, we would put that $700 there. The debits in this case, for example, we'd put $10. We'd subtract the $10 from the $700. There would be $690 to return to the address that you give us. Also, right away when you fill this out, if you could please put your name and address at the top in the blanks there. That's the property inspection checklist. Get that back to us within 3 days after you move in. And finally is a page 12, a little rectangle. It says names of tenants to put in the mailbox. Put the first and last names of everybody that will be receiving mail at this address. Put that in your mailbox, and your mail person will be very happy to know who's living there so they can deliver your mail. If you have any questions again about this lease or any of the addendums, please contact us. Again, we will have any other addendums in links below this video. You may be having some other things to add to this lease. Thank you.